Libra-Aries Nodal Access. So I'm going to turn my webcam off, so I'm just going to say goodbye visually, everybody, and then we'll get ourselves going. All right. So welcome everyone to one of our continuing public ed classes. Again, tonight's subject is the Libra-Aries Nodal Access Transit, which is from February 19th, 2014, all the way through November 12th of 2015. Before we get started with our class materials, as many of you who've been on these classes before know, we have a few housekeeping slides for you when we first start out. So let me get those going for us. First of all, at the Evolutionary Astrology Network, everyone gets to be a student of astrology, from our free podcasts to our astro library to our multimedia course. You're welcome to go to evolutionaryastrology.net and check out anything that you would like to peruse on our website. We also have a continuing addition to the EAN Astro Library. I have trouble keeping up with it all, so I'm going to turn it over to Leroy for just a moment and allow him to explain this slide to you and the changes he's been making on it. Leroy, are you there?
Well, I guess, the math is obvious, but, the big news is we produced a wonderful conference in 2013. We called it the Astrology Reincarnation and Soul Conference, Lasting Love, Real Money. All of those all those videos have been put into the various sections of the Astro Library. I went back into the archives and grabbed a bunch of other stuff. We basically upgraded this thing for about another 45 hours. So you can see the value there. In section 1 is increased to 161 different titles and 188 hours of audio and streaming video information on the archetypes. Section 2, you see the numbers there. Section 3 got the biggest lift because a lot of that astrology, reincarnation, and soul information was indeed forecasting. And so you see that we have increased that value tremendously. And we really want to encourage anybody continuing ed or new to astrology to take advantage of this value. And in fact, as a part of our webinar tonight, I'm going to throw out a coupon code. So write this one down if you're interested, if you think you might be interested in supplementing your studies with any of these sections or perhaps all Astro Library sections. For the 6 and 12-month subscriptions only, you can save $10 off any of these 6 and 12-month subscriptions. So you see the numbers there. The subscription prices, just subtract 10, but you have to enter a coupon code on checkout. So it's very simple to do that. Enter coupon code NEBULA, NEBULA, as you check out of our website, adding based upon what section you want. Or we also have that all Astro Library section, which includes everything. So a lot of value there. It is a timed subscription model, so you get it for 6 months or 12 months, $10 off using the coupon code NEBULA. So thanks for considering that, everybody. Any questions, feel free to email me. And I have not updated, all of these titles in our PDF document on the website, but just remember all those wonderful titles from the conference, and you can see the added value here.
All right. Thank you, Leroy. And so many of you may be familiar with our multimedia course. We offer it on 3 different segments. You can see them right now. You get DVDs, the tab binders, a transcript of the original JWG School, an audio archive of 250 hours of material, and of course, starting in January, I began teaching webinars for segments 1 and 2. So we're just getting started in teaching in this new format. This way you can easily come along for the ride on any of the segments if you would like to. You can go to the website. You can watch some like 5-10 minute videos of actual recordings from the DVDs if you'd like to check them out. So thank you everyone for allowing us to always do this housekeeping at the beginning. So let's get on with our subject here, the Libra-Aries nodal axis. Many of us are familiar that the transiting North node has moved into Libra. The transiting South node has moved into Aries. You may be familiar with the fact that Venus has a dual rulership, Taurus and Libra. So Venus is the ruler of the North node during this transit. Mars is the ruler of the South node in Aries during this transit. So I wanted to start out with a piece of information that's unique to evolutionary astrology and pretty significant to any of your studies if you are looking at your own chart or charts of clients. The transiting signs of the nodal axis will show the surface or apparent issues and lessons. The rulers of those transiting signs will show what the deeper or real issues and lessons are that are taking place. So those deeper lessons are going to relate back to the natal chart by those planetary rulers. So right now, that North node in Libra, the ruler's Venus. So you would look into any chart natally, Venus by house sign aspects to get the deepest levels of the lessons and opportunities for evolution with this nodal axis transit. South node in Aries, its ruler Mars. You would look in a natal chart for where natal Mars is by house, sign, and aspects to get some of the deepest lessons to the transiting South node in any chart. Now we'll look at this in more detail as we go on, but I wanted to give these to you right off the bat, so if you're sitting there with your own charts, which we always recommend that you have for any of our classes, you can be relating this information to your own chart. So right now, the nodes, and we'll go into detail with this, the nodal axis, which is the North node and South node of the moon, is very much known as the ego that any soul has. So the ego of our souls is currently developing through Mars and Venus as these rulers. Transiting Mars and Venus as they're going through the zodiac, we'll look at that tonight. And also then, the ego for each of us on a soul level is developing through the evolution of our natal Mars and Venus by house sign aspect. Now, as we get through some information here, I'm going to have a chart example for you. I want you to just keep this information. Also, if any of you are new to these classes, these webinars, after the webinar, you get the archived video, you get the PDF of all these slides, so you can actually print out these slides. So remember this when you're trying to frantically write. You don't have to. You will get a PDF of these slides that you can refer to afterwards. Now I want to go just back for a moment to the nodal axis we have just left, which was the North node in Scorpio, the South node in Taurus. And what we have really been working with here from this last nodal axis transit is the soul Pluto and its self-reliance, Venus. Those have been the deepest issues for our ego over the last 18-month transit of this nodal axis. Now I'm bringing this up because Venus is really quite active through the last transit and this transit. When we had that South node in Taurus, Venus was right there helping us deal with all of those Taurian issues from the past, known as self-reliance, survival issues, food, clothing, shelter, bringing in enough resources that we not only survive, that we can go beyond that into flourishing. And so Venus has really been there to help us evolve, move through old unconscious issues around survival that have been coming up through the last 18 months.
Kim,
Pluto, yes?
I just want to get a clarification here because we had a couple of questions come in on the board
Sure.
simultaneously, and I didn't think you were unclear. But we know that Mars and Venus, of course, are inner planets. They're very conscious planets. But how
Hmm.
is the Mars Venus ego different from the Moon ego? Did we confuse people out of the gate here, or um,
No, no.
we're
Bear
talking
with
of
me.
we're talking of the rulers of this nodal axis here?
Yes, yes. Again, I'll have some slides that are going to explain this in more detail for you. Understand that the moon, as an archetype, is our emotional self-image. Just look at the moon going around the chart. It goes all the way through the zodiac in 1 month. We have every possible emotional experience and feeling that we can have in 1 month, because in 1 month the moon makes every possible aspect it can to every other planet in the chart. So the moon has always been the archetype of the ego. And the south node is the ego from the past lives. The north node is the ego in the future. So if you will bear with me a couple of slides, I'll have this explained to you in detail. But what I was saying right here in this last statement, the ego of the soul, the nodal axis is always relating to the ego in addition to the moon. South node, north node, and moon is the evolution of our ego, how we know ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis. And when the transiting nodes are North Node Libra, South Node Aries, the ego is going to have an emphasis of developing through Mars and through Venus. Mars is desires, Venus is needs. But the ego is going to be going, what are my needs? What are my desires? Again, we'll go through this in more detail. But I just really wanted you to know that where those transiting signs are, the issue goes deeper than just the transit of those signs. It goes to the rulers of those signs on some of the deepest levels possible for the evolution of the ego. When we look at this one, the last nodal axis transit, the ego was developing through Pluto-Venus. Venus South Node again, survival needs, self-reliance needs, and then that courage, Pluto North Node and Scorpio ruler, to really do something with our talents and resources and self-reliance out there in the world with others. Now, this is a big subject. I'm not going to go over that. The only point I wanted to make with this slide is that Venus was the ruler of the South Node in the last transit. And as we move from Scorpio Taurus into Libra Aries, Venus flips over to now be the ruler of the North Node. My point is that we have a very, very strong emphasis on Venus through both of these nodal axis transits. And as we go through this, you are going to get this theme of Venus really deepening the relationship with ourself, South Node Taurus, so that now we will take Venus out into the world of relationships with others based upon how well we went through this last Scorpio Taurus transit, deepening our inner relationship with ourselves, self-reliance. Again, we're going to unfold this for you, but I just wanted to give this to you a little visually to follow through. And Leroy, you're always welcome to interrupt me as any questions come on the board, honey, and also to open the lines up as questions come along.
You did great.
Um,
They got their clarity and they responded on the board. So good job. Thanks.
all right, no problem. So let's take a look at nodal axis astronomy first. I'm always someone who likes to bring out the astronomy or the math or how you look at it out there, space-time somewhat in the future. And then we move into the astrology, which is the archetypical interpretations, the art and the science. The North Node and South Node are just points in space where the moon's path intersects with the plane of the ecliptic. Now, the ecliptic is where the sun appears to go around the earth in a circle. from our geocentric or Earth-centered viewpoint. Really, it is the Earth traveling around the sun. But we call the ecliptic the sun's apparent path. It's where it looks to be going. When the moon's path crosses above the ecliptic, the sun's path, that's what we call the north node or the ascending node. When the moon's path crosses below the ecliptic, we call that the south node or the descending node. Now I'll show this to you visually. Here is, look at the sun here. Here's the sun traveling in what looks like a horizontal circle. The dotted line is the moon's path traveling. The furthest that the moon and the sun get apart in their paths is 5 degrees. And when this moon's path, the dotted line, crosses the ecliptic north, here's the north node. 2 weeks later, the moon crosses the ecliptic and goes south of it, and it's the south node. So the moon makes this circle once a month, 2 weeks apart, crossing above the ecliptic and below the ecliptic. Now this point right here of the north node and this point of the south nodes, they are not stationary. They slowly move backwards. They move the direction of the arrow that you see the north node going. South node moves this way around the circle. North node moves this way. They are moving the opposite. Now when the moon is as far north of the ecliptic as it gets, 5 degrees, it is actually exactly square, the north node, south node, right here. When the moon is as far south of the ecliptic as it gets, it is actually halfway between the nodes again and square the nodes. Now, this intersecting point, again, it moves around in a circle. And as a matter of fact, it takes 18 years to go around that circle. The nodal axis moving around that circle of the ecliptic precesses. That means it moves backwards. And it takes 18.6 years to go around that circle. Let me go back to it and just show it to you one more time visually. These transiting nodes, which with the moon are always opposite each other, they move backwards along this circle. And every 18.6 years, the north node and the south node make a complete circle and come back to the same spot. The mean motion of the nodes is retrograde. Now, astrologically, this nodal axis moving backwards signifies a return to universal source on a solar lunar level. We are speaking the path of the sun, the ecliptic, and the path of the moon, that moon's lunar path. And so, again, just look at this point right here. Nodes of the moon moving backwards around the zodiac are representative of a return to universal source on a solar lunar level. This is a very conscious level when we're working with the sun and the moon. Our self-identity, our self-actualization, our personality, and again, moon being representative of the ego. The nodal axis is retrograde approximately 90% of the time. It's direct about 10% of the time. In other words, there's a wobbling effect where the nodal axis will go forward a little bit and then it goes back to going retrograde again. And this is why in evolutionary astrology we do not use the mean motion. We do not use mean nodes in the astrological software. We go with the true nodes. Where are the nodes at that moment, that minute in space-time anybody's born? Are they retrograde or are they direct? What has been observed in evolutionary astrology is that 90% of the time when someone's born and the nodes are actually retrograde, there's a stronger sense of destiny earlier in the life. The 10% of people who are born with the nodal axis direct, that sense of destiny takes longer. It seems to come later in life. Now you can observe this for yourself. You can start observing and correlating this with any charts that you work with. Now, because that nodal axis takes approximately 18.5 years to go around the zodiac, the nodal
Months,
axis
of course.
transits by sign, or
You meant months, right,
no,
Kim?
no. The nodal axis takes 18.6 years to go around the zodiac. Divided by 12, the nodal axis transit by sign is approximately 18 months.
Excuse me, thank you.
Yeah, no worry, no worry. Now the mean daily motion is 3 minutes of arc retrograde, not 3 degrees, 3 minutes. 60 minutes equal 1 degree, 360 degrees equals the circle. Or no, yeah, 60 minutes equals 1 degree. And God, 60 minutes equals, you know what I mean. Never mind. Throwing myself off, honey.
60 degrees equals 1 minute.
Question.
No, is that right?
60
Minutes
minutes equals
equals
1
degree.
1 degree. 60. Why am I having a blank out on this? I know this so much. Okay, when I remember it, I'll tell you. Sometimes I rattle things off so much that it gets to be a little crazy.
69 minutes of arc equals 1 degree.
60 minutes
60
of
minutes
arc
arc equals 1 degree.
1 degree. 30 degrees equals 1 sign.
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that.
We
Questions before I move on?
We do have a question, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the line for Daniel. His question is a little too long to type, so Daniel, go ahead and ask a clarifying question of Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Daniel.
I'm trying to correlate. Hi, I'm trying to correlate the astronomy to astrology, and it seems logical to me that the ascending node would be the south node because it rises up over the horizon and becomes visible, and then it goes down under the horizon and becomes invisible. So somehow it seems like it ought to be the other way around, with the ascending node representing the past because what's behind it is hidden and we can't see it anymore. And then the north node, as it then goes down under over the next horizon, becomes the future because it then also is invisible. It is also the future. It's the future path of it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly either, because if you're looking at this visually, you're looking at, okay, the moon going above the ecliptic, all right? It's not whether or not it's visual in the sky, because both the south node point and the north node point in space are visual every 24 hours with the rotation of the Earth's axes. Okay?
But the moon is not. But the moon is not.
No.
That's my point. When the moon crosses the ascending node, it becomes visible to us, right?
No.
Correct.
The moon is visible. The moon is visible when it gets beyond the sun, and you have new moon, crescent moon, first quarter, gibbous moon. That is a monthly cycle. That visual is a monthly cycle. So you're talking apples and oranges, really. The nodes of the moon have no relationship to whether or not you can visually see the moon. It has to relate to when the moon's path either crosses above the ecliptic or below the ecliptic.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
So they're points in space. Don't confuse them with being planets that you literally have to see. Now, when we get to eclipses later in this class, then it becomes a very visual thing, because eclipses will only take place where this south node point is and this north node point. And I have two more diagrams that I'll show you of how solar and lunar eclipses actually take place, and those are visual. All right?
Thank you for taking the time to clarify it. Yes, thank you.
You bet. No worries. No worries at all. Other questions before I move on, Leroy?
Nope, you're clear for now.
Okay. So again, just returning to this one more moment. You can see this information right here. And I'm going to move on. You'll have the PowerPoint, or you'll have the PDFs of the PowerPoint slideshows. Now, generically, that south node of the moon represents the soul's ego from the past. It's the accumulation of the emotional residues from all of our past lives. It is also the past of this lifetime. When we look at a south node in a chart, from the moment that soul is born, again, it's a snapshot. It is the archetype in consciousness of the soul's past egos, all accumulated together. And it's not stuck, it's not stationary. After so many lifetimes, that south node can be represented by different signs, different houses. Even the ego of the past has an evolution. The south node represents security because it is already known from the past. And if you just, again, we're talking about the south node and north node of the moon. And we know that moon is an archetype of the ego, the emotional self-image, how we feel secure. Just think of your own moon and what it takes to make you feel emotionally secure. Look at your own south node in your chart. You know it. And you gravitate towards it. Roy and I just got back from vacation. It was wonderful. I have a south node in Taurus. The closer we get to leaving, the more frantic I get over making sure that I have the right clothes that I am bringing along. And of course, where did I go? I went south, and it was supposed to be spring, and then it was cold, and I was going back and forth between warm clothes, cold clothes, warm clothes, cold clothes. The joke with the south node in Taurus is that it's got to bring all its stuff along. And I know it. It's a joke with Leroy and I. So you all can look at your own south node and know that that's where you feel comfortable. It's a point of familiarity, both positive and negative, or as Martin Schulman calls it, if anybody's got his old books, he will call the south node the gifts and our Achilles heel, where we have built up so much effort and talent with our efforts that, again, it brings through stuff that we just automatically know. But it also can be the weakest link of where we're going to get stuck. So the south node in general can be a point of stagnation. Again, it's comfortable, it's security. It makes us feel safe and secure. The north node is the leading edge development of the soul's ego in this lifetime. It's where our self-image is evolving towards. And it represents insecurity, as we haven't been there yet. It's unknown. It's uncharted territory. We must make the effort to move in that direction. The north node represents that future, so it will represent some of the dharma for our ego, some of the responsibilities that we emotionally need to develop and evolve with. Many times that north node is going to feel like a sense of destiny. The north node has as much power as the south node. So with the north node, it's going to have this magnetic energy that wants to pull us forward. There's something enticing or seductive about our north nodes that we want to evolve towards. So the north node is going to represent that point of movement. Now here's where we put the two of them together. The nodal axis is always operating in tandem. We feel like it bounces back and forth, but it's always operating in tandem. And the past, which is the south node, and the future, which is the north node, are always in the tension of the present moment, the moon. And again, all of this is taking place on a very egoic or emotional level. And all you have to do is think of your own south node, north node, and the placement of your own moon by its sign house and even aspects. And you're going to see where you are always in your own tension. The past, the future, what am I going to do now? And we are always trying to balance that past and future at each and every moment. The past is always trying to project itself forward on to the future. The past is always trying to shape the future. And so, therefore, does it make more sense that that retrograde mean motion of the nodes represents leaving the past behind and moving forward? Just thinking on these 3 points right here brings in a lot of logic to the nodal axis. We know by looking at our own life without astrology how many of us repeat, project that past forward with all of the planets. That's why the planets have a polarity point. In many ways, it's symbolic of what we are looking at right here. Jeffrey Green would always call it any archetype having a trinity: the past, the future, and then the present moment of trying to evolve or heal that past in order to move forward into the future and evolve. And we really see this with the nodal axis. Let's look at an Aries South node. When we have the transiting South node in Aries, and by the way, all this will be active for somebody who has natal South node in Aries, natal South node in the first house, and the planet Mars conjunct the South node. Archetypically, this will all be similar energy. But in Aries South node, there's a very strong sense of self and ego. It's the first sign of the zodiac. And the first sign of the zodiac, the baby of the zodiac, me, myself, and I. So that Aries South node energy for all of us on the planet right now is bringing up a sense of self. Who am I? How do I feel? So that it creates those self-words, self-centered, selfish, self-assertion, brings up all that energy about ourself. And one of the things about the sign of Aries, the need for freedom at all costs. And anytime there is any sense, any feeling, ego here, that freedom is being compromised or trampled upon, Aries South node gets very defensive, angry. They will not compromise their freedom, no matter what. And, you know, stay tuned on the planet right now with this Cardinal Grand Cross, and as the nodal axis moves through Libra-Aries over the next 18 months, and we might see more and more and more social unrest, no matter what the country. We could see more and more anger with violence over guns and sexual violence with Mars and all of that stuff, because that transiting South Node in Aries is just bringing this type of energy up for everybody. It's bringing up the warrior in all of us, because to an Aries South Node, it's me versus you. And it's me versus everybody else on the planet. And so it brings up that talk about Taurus is survival resources. Aries is survival itself. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, is that archetype of birth or rebirth. Well, you can be born, but you've got to survive before food even matters. And you need food to survive. But again, there is this survival instinct that is so strong in Aries South Node energy. And so the instinct is to just do whatever they can to survive. And it brings out all of this Aries, Martian impulsiveness, that instinct to act. And what happens then with that Aries South Node is, because there is that instinct to act or become, they don't take the time to think through decisions. So all of us, in some degree, we're all going to be influenced to some degree with impulsiveness, with that I've got to do it, I've got to get it done, you know. And so Aries learns by action reaction. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is. But when we don't take the time to think things through, sometimes an Aries South Node has to do it again and again and again, till eventually they get enough feedback from the universe, Libra North Node, that they start to recognize they're not in it all by themselves. So during this South Node transit through Aries, we're all going to have to be a little careful about that impulsiveness when we're making our decisions, because we can fly off the cuff in our relationships or our career or our handling of money and resources, and do something instinctively and then go, oops, oh, here comes the credit card bill. An Aries South Node will represent wounds of childhood, this life and past lives. One of the generic things that you will see, especially if you find outer planets in the first house or in Aries, it sometimes can be representative of short lives, not making it out of childhood. So an Aries South Node, because of running all this fiery, me, myself, it's all my world energy, what can happen is there can be emotional immaturity and stagnation. They don't evolve emotionally. So with the transit of this Aries South Node, we're all going to be picking up on some of our emotional wounds from this childhood and childhoods from past lives. And we could find ourselves just impulsively acting things out on emotional levels and then going, oh, where'd that come from? That's not me. Well, there's some part of it that is you that's surfacing from the past. Because again, the lunar nodes, remember, are conscious. When we're dealing with the moon, we're dealing with things that we can grasp. And wherever that transiting south node is, it's going to be bringing things up from the past into consciousness to readdress them, heal them, move towards that north node. I spoke a little bit about, again, sometimes there's Aries South Node wounds because we didn't make it out of childhood. Aries South Node, there is a major lack of awareness when it comes to the other. The other is not just the intimate partners. It can be the parent, it can be the child, it can be the co-worker, the boss, the employee, the friend. It's everybody. An Aries South node has a hard time being supportive to others. It projects onto others. That Libra polarity of projection, it projects onto others and has no idea until it gets the feedback Libra polarity. They'll expect others to just be like them, think like them, act like them, feel like them. Well, this made me feel sad. It doesn't make you feel sad? Well, I think this is a joke. Why are you not laughing? And it's hard for them to see that mirror. They expect everything to be just like them. Aries South Node can be very, very indifferent to how others see them. Oh, I'm hurting your feelings, Libra polarity? Well, I didn't notice that. There is a tendency for that Aries South Node to want to be in charge of everybody else. They want to run the show, whether it's deciding where to go to the movies or what restaurant to eat at or how to be in relationship, whatever the situation is, they want to be in charge of it so they feel free. And eventually, one of the things that Aries South Node has to learn is they can't do it all by themselves. Again, this is the loner. And sooner or later, it gets too lonely. And that's when Aries moves over towards Leo, or Libra, excuse me. Gotta take a drink of water. Questions?
I suppose this might be perhaps a good time to talk about a question that came up on the board, Kim, and you can defer it if you need to, but we know we have Lucifer in Aries. We just completed a webinar on the archetype of Lucifer. What would be the effect of that transit um, as it moves
Looks,
through Aries on the south node?
yes. Well, as Lucifer eventually conjuncts the South Node in Aries, and I don't have the date on that, but it's got to be soon here within the next month. When Lucifer conjuncts that South Node in Aries, it's going to take everything from the past and try and keep us stuck there. It's going to try and keep us stuck in selfishness. It's going to try and keep us stuck in all our defensiveness and fluff you. I don't care about anybody else, and you're just out to get me, and I'm going to get you before you get me. Those are the distortions of that. If we look at the bearer of light with Lucifer and that South Node in Aries, it can bring out a sense of courage within ourselves wherever it's necessary or needed. It can, sometimes there will be so much wounding to our own ego that we just go egoless. We completely let go of all of our Aries energy and just kind of soak into nothingness. That's the other extreme. And so in a healthy respect, that Aries South Node is knowing when to stick up for ourselves, when to find our courage, when to have those Libra polarity healthy boundaries with somebody else. Now with an Aries South Node, the areas that we need to review. South Node is about reviewing, letting go. Again, remember, we talked about this earlier. Whatever house cusp the sign of Aries is on, or if it's intersected in a house, that's going to be some of the issues, but they're going to be more the surface issues. And then you're going to still go back to where your natal Mars is, by house, sign, and aspects. And that transiting South Node in Aries by house is going to be triggering your natal Mars all over the place. And those are going to be the deeper issues. And those deeper issues with Mars are the desired nature of the soul on a conscious level. In evolutionary astrology, Pluto the soul is the unconscious desires, and they are made conscious via Mars, the instinct to become. And so that South Node in Aries, when you look at your own natal Mars, it's really going to be triggering your desire nature, Mars. And you're going to find some of those deeper issues by the house and sign and aspects that Mars makes. We'll go into chart example here. This is just some of the overviews. We also are going to really have to work on letting go of any emotional, egoic wounds. Aries South Node, we're wanting to find a new sense of ourselves. We also need to let go of the old desires no longer serving our souls. I'll talk more about this Mars retrograde cycle coming up in Libra in a few slides. Other questions before I move on, Roy?
No, we look pretty good, Kim.
All right, I appreciate you running the board, Roy.
Yeah, we're just interacting with a couple of students here, and so when something becomes relevant, there is a couple of questions came in, Kim, about the nodal inversion. In other words, people have is it a nodal return if we have that transiting
A
north
note,
node on the south node? Go ahead.
a nodal that's a nodal inversion, and I have a slide coming up on that. Thank you for your patience. We do have to go slide by slide.
Did
I'm
anybody
feeling
out
this.
there did anybody out there think that Kim wouldn't have the slide? Yeah, we are a little. This is an Aries board here, by the way.
It's Aries South Node. I want my question first, and I want all the questions right now.
Anyway, you're clear to continue. We got to keep the flow up with time.
Okay. So Libra North Node. You know, Libra is that archetype of all of the diversity that makes us up as humans. And it is through the interaction with all of the different humans on the planet that we compare and contrast ourselves with others to figure out who we are and who we are not. And so that South Node in Aries is going to move us then towards that Libra North Node and give us that ability to say, this is who I am. This is who I'm not. Getting a clearer sense of ourselves. That Libra North Node is where we are going to learn the art of relating and relationships. We're going to learn to take relationships to new levels. And this is especially true in evolutionary astrology with this principle we call natural law or natural spiritual principles. Relationships are about cooperation. They're about sharing, giving, and receiving. And so these are the themes that we're going to be moving forward with. How do I want to be in relationship? How do I want to renegotiate how we give and receive with each other in relationship? How can I become aware of the other in my life? And again, with other, it's not just the intimate partner. Yes, they're involved. But it brings in, again, the parent, the child, the boss, the co-worker, the employee, the friend, the neighbor across the street. It brings in all of the others. So we'll find this Libra North Node moving us forward with all kinds of relationships in our lives. And yes, the Libra North Node is learning how to see something from somebody else's perspective. That Aries South Node, me, myself, and I can only see it from my point of view. The Aries North Node is going to be just as powerful, just as dynamic. Oh my gosh, I never knew that you looked at it from that perspective. I never realized that this situation was really vulnerable and sensitive for you and triggered your fears. I just didn't notice that. Thank you for sharing that with me and explaining it. Now with Libra, we are always going to be working on healthy boundaries because Libra is the seventh sign of the zodiac and it initiates the second half of the circle. So Libra is so orientated to the other person that, again, one of the distortions that comes up with Libra is codependency. They're the opposite of the Aries selfishness. Libra can go to selflessness. And therefore, there needs to be healthy boundaries with Libra. It brings up that famous saying, when to give and when not to give. And when not giving is actually a greater giving. If I just love them a little more, they're going to love me back. If I just give myself away a little more, they're going to love me back. No. That's where you need some of that South Node Aries greater sense of self, so you can stand up and say, fluff you, no more treating me this way. Libra also will have this tendency to put a lot of expectation out there. If I'm giving this way, surely they're going to give back exactly like that. Again, if they don't reciprocate, then learn how to step back and look at those expectations that you're projecting out there onto all of your other relationships. Because as you do that, then you can minimize the disappointments when you're not receiving as you expect it to come back to you. This is a real big one for Libra. Give, 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 and sooner or later I'm going to get just a little tiny bit back, aren't I? No. Sometimes the Libra needs to know that their first word is no. Aries doesn't have any problem saying it. The Libra North Node is also where, again, going beyond just relationships with those that we know in our life. We're looking for fairness and justice for all concerned. You can see how this is active on a social political realm in the world today, no matter what country you want to look at in the moment. And that fairness and justice, it's going to go from the one-on-one relationships to family, to friends, to work environments with squares from Cancer, Capricorn, all the way through to big social political world. The Libra North Node lessons to move forward with. We'll look to that house cusp that's ruled by Libra, or where it's intercepted. Yes, there'll be lessons there and everything we just talked about. Fairness, giving and receiving, including how we share. The deeper lessons are going to go to wherever your natal Venus is by house sign aspects. And Venus is where we're going to get that courage to relate in new ways. As we are renewing that Aries South node and finding a new self, a new who am I, we're going to take that forward into relationships. Now this Libra North node is supported by the Venus retrograde cycle we just had in Capricorn. What is the bottom line for me, Capricorn? What are my needs? And we've had 6 weeks of really looking at what is the most important things to us in our life, Capricorn. And I'll also refer you back to the fact that the last nodal transit, South Node in Taurus, we had Venus in its own sign, Taurus, inner self-reliance, the Venus retrograde cycle in Capricorn, Earth sign. I think Venus is going to be stronger during this Libra North node because of the recent Venus retrograde and the last nodal transit. Even the Mars retrograde in Libra, Venus's sign, it is pointing toward Venus being the strong one here. My needs count. Everybody has needs that count. How do I give to someone what they actually need versus what I want to project onto them? How do I ask for what I really need rather than what somebody else wants to give to feel comfortable? So when we put this together, this Libra-Aries nodal axis, it is about releasing old fears within ourselves and exploring new relating patterns. If we fall on the selfish end, we're going to have to learn how to give more. If we fall on the selfless end, we are going to have to learn how to receive and perhaps demand that we receive what is fair for ourselves. We have to let go of desires that no longer serve our own soul. Well, here's a big one. We have to learn to trust our instinct again in making decisions. Aries South node can act very impulsively. And if they did something out of impulse, without listening to the gut, they can feel that, well, I can't trust myself. And so we're going to, Aries South node, review the ways in which we don't trust ourselves. And we've got to learn to gather that instinct again. Mars has rulership of the solar plexus chakra, the third chakra, co-ruler with Pluto, which is the gut. And we have to learn to trust that on an instinctive level again. And then that allows that Libra indecision to make decisions. And then, of course, as we've been talking all the way through this, we're having to balance ourselves with others. And we have to recognize that we can have freedom through our relationships. It's not us or them. It is us and them. Now, that phasal relationship of natal Venus and Mars, including their signs, their houses, their aspects with other planets, their aspects with each other, you can go back and look at that in your natal chart. It will represent some of the deepest lessons that your soul is going to be learning on egoic or emotional levels during this nodal transit. It's going to ask you to learn how to meet your own needs, Venus, and then act upon those needs evolving into your desires, Mars. And you're going to do it through relationships. And you're going to have to interact with others who are wanting to do the same thing. Now, what will also be involved with this, I'm going to move on into some of the nodal axis aspects. Before I do, I'm going to pause for a moment, take a drink of water. I'm going to see if Leroy has any further questions for me from the board. Anybody?
Robin, did you want to ask a question? You have your hand raised.
I had written you, and you had said that perhaps it would be clear, and I was just going to try to be patient. But basically, I was trying to understand. I'm still feeling unclear as to how the whole thing comes around. Like, I understand I'm looking to the ruling planet, and I'm looking to the natal position of the ruling planet and the issues of that ruling planet to understand the deeper issues. But what I'm not seeing, I don't know why I'm missing this, is how it relates to your natal south and north node. How does it evolve that, or how do I look at that?
Okay, that's a good question, because the transiting nodal axis in a generic way will relate back to your natal nodes. All right? They'll be making various aspects along the way. I do have a slide on that. It's not a lot of detail. It will, let me see if I can, there's several different ways I can answer the question, okay? First of all, the natal south node, of course, is going to be the ego from the past that you've accumulated. And the north node is going to be the opposite of that, how you are really trying to emotionally evolve, egoically evolve in this lifetime. You can look at the transits of the nodes through the zodiac going backwards. You can forget about the planetary rulers if you want to. You can just look at the transits, and they're always going to have their aspects to the natal nodes by, this might be a little complicated, by the 30-degree dial or by the 45-degree dial. Okay, meaning you'll have a semi-sextile, you'll have a semi-square, you'll have a sextile. You can relate the transiting nodes to the natal nodes by aspect all the way through the 18-year cycle and look at it that way. That will give you a lot of information. All right? Looking at the rulers of the transiting nodes, and then looking at those rulers by your natal chart, in this case Venus, Mars, that is a whole separate path of looking at egoic or emotional evolution. There's another way to look at it. You know how we generically say in evolutionary astrology that every planet is in relationship to every other planet? They're going to have a phasal relationship, one of the 8 phases. And within that, any 2 planets could have aspects within that phasal relationship. I got a lot of background noise. Is that you breathing, Leroy? And so if you look at the fact that the moon and the nodal axis, they're going to be having a relationship with every other planet in the chart. The moon and the nodes are going to relate to Venus, how your ego is developing its needs, how you feel emotionally about your needs. The moon in the nodal axis is going to have a relationship to Uranus, how you are liberating your soul and how that makes the ego feel insecure, or where that excites the ego to be breaking free in some way. So there's multiple different paths of looking at the nodal axis and its rulers. Now that was 3 ways of answering that generically. Is this helping, Robin? It's a complicated question, and it can get real complicated real fast with the nodal axis.
Yes, it did help a bit. Honestly, Kim Marie, what I find works the best for me is examples. So if perhaps you would have time when you're doing your, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. Okay. I'm getting through information here as fast as I can because I do have a chart for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Leroy's quiet.
You can move on. You can move on.
Move on? Okay. All right. All right, so because the South Node's ruled by Mars, I just wanted to put out some of the Mars aspects for you. Again, one of the reasons I'm putting this out is because after this class, you're going to have these slides as a PDF, and so you can refer to them. I just wanted to hit on some of the highlights of when Mars will be making aspects to the nodes. All right? Mars is the ruler of the transiting South Node. And so you can see Mars is not going to make any aspects until July. And it makes a conjunction, a square, an opposition. Then it makes the trines to the nodes. You can see where I've got a few of these listed here. Whenever, and when I say Mars conjunct the North Node, most of you know that means it's opposing the South Node. When it's squaring one node, it's squaring the other node. When Mars is opposing the North Node, it's conjunct the South Node. All right? Generically, what you need to look at with these Mars aspects is whenever these aspects are going on through these dates here, and I've kind of segued some of them together for you when they look a little clustered with aspects, this is when there's going to be an emphasis on the South Node because Mars rules it, and something about self is going to be coming up. Something about the wounds to our own ego. Something about feeling abandoned or alone or feeling defensive and angry is going to come up with any of these Mars aspects. Yes, I can go through each and every one of them, but we will be here for 5 hours. I just want to bring this out as information for you so that you can be looking at these slides. I would welcome you to print out these slides, and then you've got this handy to refer to as you're going through your life and something comes along, and you can check these dates and just see what's happening here. Generically, Mars conjunct the North Node. It's going to be the opposite sign of its rulership. It's really going to be pushing us towards the Libra relationships and what's fairness. How are we going to merge and move those relationships forward? When Mars is on the transiting South Node, there's going to be a lot more combativeness and a lot more Aries energy. Me versus you. Mars square the nodes, there can be frustrations or confusions going on around that. When you see in May when we have these trines that are going on, it's quite possible that could be a very smooth, easy time period because of the trines to the North Node, sextiles to the South Node. That might be some breakthrough energy and figuring some things out. That's going to come right after the Mars retrograde, right in here when we're looking at that. Going down to the end of the cycle, Venus and Mars are going to conjunct each other and the North Node of the Moon towards the end of this nodal axis cycle. This Mars retrograde cycle that is coming up, Mars is going to be in the opposite sign of its own rulership. And the nodal axis moving through that sign of Aries. This is a Mars retrograde that is really going to help us emphasize a sense of objectivity between ourself and relationships. Now, 2 nights from now, March 26th, I'm going to have a class on the Mars retrograde cycle. It'll be a much easier subject than tonight. And we'll go into a lot more detail about this Mars retrograde and its aspects and all of the details we can look through. But as it relates to this nodal axis transit, this Mars retrograde cycle coming up is going to really help us in releasing old wounds and desires, especially if we're making any effort to get past our defenses and me, myself, and I. And it's going to also emphasize an ability to really move into new relating patterns and desires. You know, this is going to be the opposite of the transit of Lucifer and Aries conjunct the South Node and creating all the feistiness out there in the world. This really does move energy towards more cooperation. And I've been saying generically with Mars retrograde in Libra, the opposite sign of its rulership, this is a Mars retrograde where we're going to have to continue to take action. Because Libra can get so caught up in the discussing of everything and weighing the pros and cons back and forth that it can paralyze itself. And we don't stop acting in a Mars retrograde just like we don't stop talking in a Mercury retrograde. Life still takes place. This Mars retrograde will give us that opportunity to really try out some new relationship stuff and hopefully move forward with that. There are a lot of Venus aspects in this nodal axis transit. I've just listed a few of the basic ones. I kind of shied away from trines and sextiles because they're smoother, easier aspects. I put more energy into listing conjunctions, squares, oppositions. So when you see Venus, of course, conjuncting the North Node, it's going to be in its own sign. It's really going to be emphasizing partnership. When you see Venus conjunct the South Node in Aries, again, we'll bring out more of that Aries feistiness. Similar to the Mars, when Venus is square the nodes, there can be confusion. Mars, there'll be confusion square the nodes around how to act. Venus, there'll be confusion square the nodes around how do I really feel? What do I really want? You can look forward here to this fall when you see Sun, Mercury, Venus conjunct the nodes real close together 1 month. You'll see later on there is a sextile where there's 3, Venus, Mercury, Sun. Again, these are kind of just clusters of time periods, or I just listed the emphasis of the harsh angles so that you can kind of look at those time periods. Even if you're not really big on astrology, just knowing these dates will help you in your own learning curve, your own learning process. You look forward to September of 2015 when we have this Mars-Venus. They're going to come along. I'll show you the Mars-Venus transits next. This one right here is a waning semi-sextile to the North Node. It's going to be a waxing sesquisquadrate to the South Node. This would be a little tension and frustrating time because Mars and Venus is going to be in Leo, and it's going to emphasize what about me, and hopefully by the end of the nodal transit, getting to the last few degrees, we really have more energy into compromise. Just a reminder, we're coming off of this Venus retrograde cycle, Venus ruling the South Node. We've been working on that self-reliance, and Venus ruler of that North Node. Venus is strong in this nodal transit by these cycles right here. Just a little review. I've already spoken about this. Now, here's what I want you to just glance at. And again, I'm going to have the printout, so just here, if you can, Libra, and you can review these details further on. Because Venus and Mars are the rulers of the nodal axis transit. Their relationship to each other by transit is very activating to this nodal lessons, these nodal lessons. I went back to Venus last conjunction with Mars just so you could see the dates. Isn't that interesting? Aries. And of course, Venus made 3 waxing squares to Mars during its recent retrograde cycle. And so again, Venus moving away from Mars. What are my needs? What are my needs that are evolving out of me in relationships? How do I want to change relationships? Venus ruling the North Node says. You'll see Venus again then moving forward with the squares, trines, moving along here. The Mars retrograde cycle comes along. We only have 1 Venus-Mars opposition during that retrograde cycle. You see it just before Mars goes direct. Moving along into July, you see July of this year on 1 day. Mars is going to conjunct the North Node. Venus is going to trine it. This could be a this could be an easier time for communications in relationships and having some relationship energy that is actually moving forward. And then we'll move into later on this year. You can see that there are more Venus-Mars aspects with the nodes. One more slide on Venus-Mars transits. Venus will conjunct Mars again, February of next year, again in Aries, early Aries, and then both Venus and Mars will oppose the nodes Then they'll both square the nodes. Look at this. We're going to have one more Venus retrograde cycle here before the nodes get out of Libra-Aries. Will be the last time we'll have a Venus retrograde where Virgo is the ruler of Venus, ruler of the Venus retrograde cycle. Stay tuned for more on that one in the future. You see where Venus makes 3 conjunctions to Mars in 2015 if you look at this slide. Depending on how the Venus-Mars retrograde cycles go, Venus and Mars will make 1 or 3 conjunctions and 1 or 3 oppositions. It just varies depending upon the retrograde cycle. But as you get into the tail end of that nodal axis transit, Venus will make the 3rd conjunction to Mars. If you just look at this, February 2015, 2 degrees Aries, August 2015, 15 Leo, November 24 Virgo, and then Venus and Mars will each conjunct the nodes one more time. So this is probably typical Venus-Mars transit energy together. What I've added into this picture of these 3 slides is, again, the aspects they each make to the nodes, because they are the rulers of the transiting nodes, so they're going to be more emphasized and more active. Now when I repeat, the nodal axis transit, North Node Libra, South Node Aries, will have all of our egos evolving through Venus and Mars as the rulers. Does this make a little more sense to you? Again, these are a lot of aspects. I could do a full day class. I think we'd all get bored. You're going to put it together. You're going to have this to refer to as time goes by. I wanted to give one little slide here on Venus and Mars in regards to health and wellness. These could be some of the areas where we will see stress, and stress is one of the biggest issues in regards to manifestation of things on a physical level. You can look right here and see what Venus rules: white blood cells, veins and capillaries, kidneys, adrenals, especially cortisone, estrogen, co-rules ovaries with the moon, lower back, urinary. This is not inclusive. There can be more to these lists, but I try to pick out the major things. Mars, red blood cells, arteries and capillaries, muscles, acidity, energy levels, especially with iron, adrenals with adrenaline, progesterone. Men have both estrogen, Venus rules, and testosterone, Mars rules. Prostate with Jupiter and Saturn, primary brain with the moon. So Venus and Mars co-rule the adrenals, which regulates our hormones and our metabolism. It's going to be important through this nodal axis transit that we are working with diet, exercise, and rest so we don't burn out the adrenals. That is so common in our westernized world, because we are all so busy in the westernized world. We don't take time to eat right. We don't take time to get enough exercise, let alone get enough rest. This becomes even more emphasized with Venus and Mars ruling the nodal axis transit. And you've got to have healthy adrenals in order to regulate your hormones and your metabolism. By now, most of us have all heard you stay away from processed foods, white sugar, white flour. You have, as you know, plenty of water, lean, greasy vegetables, fish, meat. If you eat such, you all know how to find those healthy diets. It's very much in the news, even in federal governments in the westernized world nowadays. The more that you work with this through the transit, the better that you will be able to handle stress in any of these areas. B-complex vitamins are especially important for Mars so that it can balance out acidity and energy levels. When you are working with the adrenals, one of the herbs in EA that's well known for balancing the adrenals is Fo-Ti root. F-O-Ti root. Fo-Ti root, very well known for helping balance out the adrenals so that we are not so stressed and we're not overproducing or underproducing cortisol, adrenaline, estrogen, progesterone. Just briefly, a few more aspects with the other planets. I just put down here when the sun opposes, squares, conjuncts the nodal axis, because again, the nodes are on the plane of the ecliptic. So when the sun has these stressful, harsh, strong aspects to the nodal axis, this can be time periods when also we find energy depletion. And it will be important to take care of diet, exercise, and rest during these time periods. Sun is life force and vitality. When sun's on that south node, it's going to be throwing the light on the past and how to heal it. When sun is square the nodes, we must be careful in splitting ourselves apart. Having the just feeling like we're running both directions. Me, you, balancing myself and others. When the sun is conjunct the north node, there's going to be the emphasis on the relationships. When we have the sextiles and the trines, it will be much smoother, easier energy. These are going to be the aspects in which we are wanting to really work with ourselves and others, healing ourselves, balancing our relationships. This is when it's going to require a little extra effort. Just briefly, this is when the sun has clusters with other planets. By cluster, I'm going by the time period. You can see the first one, sextiles, easier time periods, things are flowing. The next one in May 2015, trines, easier time periods. That's summer of 2015 when we have Sun, Mars, Mercury square the nodes. Again, we're going to have to be a little more careful during that time period, energy-wise, and building up karma or with ourself and relationships if we're not honoring how we feel, because those planets will all be in Cancer, squaring the nodes Libra-Aries. And then look at the latter part of 2015. Mercury 3 conjunction, Sun and Venus all conjunct the north node at the tail end of that nodal axis transit. What that's going to mean when we get to that fall time period of 2015, year and a half into this axis, we need to know who we are and what we want in relationships. And if we haven't acted by then, there could be a push with this energy. We'll either be committing relationships into relationships in new ways, or we may be going the Y in the road. Now here's a fun one. Mercury is in 2014 and 2015. This is the planet making lots of easy aspects to the nodal axis. I put the opposition, squares, conjunctions in. But the Mercury retrogrades are going from water signs to air signs. And in 2015, all the Mercury retrogrades will be in air signs. So we have the nice, easy trines and sextiles to the nodal axis for the most part. Again, if you want to, just look at the clusters with Mercury in its retrograde. Every time Mercury makes a retrograde cycle here for the next 4 retrogrades, it's going to have aspects to the nodal axis. So the information will be coming through on what it is about ourselves we need to heal and then take it forward in relationships. Mercury is going to be very active, making sure we get the messages, making sure we do the communications, making sure we are figuring it out. This is 2014. Here is 2015. Whoops. Next 5 Mercury retrograde cycles, it is interacting with the nodal axes. And as you can see, I'm going to back up just a moment, everybody. Trine, conjunction, trine, trine, conjunction. So again, for the most part, Mercury will be a very strong messenger in really helping us understand who we are, what we need to heal within ourselves, and then how we are going to evolve forward in our relationships. The outer planets, very few aspects. Probably the most important ones is the fact that Jupiter is going to square the nodes in June. Pluto will square the nodes next January. And Jupiter squaring the nodes, that will be in orb for about a month. Pluto square the nodes, that will be in orb for most likely 6 months. Uranus opposing the south node will be in orb for 3 to 4 months. Jupiter square the nodes, there will be confusion around our beliefs, confusions around how we feel. And we need to make the effort with Jupiter square the nodes to get clear on what is our stuff and what belongs to someone else and what we really desire and want in relationships on a deep level. How do we feel about being loved? Jupiter will still be in Cancer, finishing up that Cancer retrograde cycle. So there will be a lot in regards to that emotional self-reliance. Moon rules Cancer. And so are my relationships working for me or not? How do I love myself better and minimize projecting it out there to others? Pluto's square of the nodes next January in Capricorn could have it almost the opposite of Cancer. We could be in a shutdown mode in regards to relationships. Capricorn. We could be looking at our relationships like they're a business deal rather than how we feel. And there could be some control games going on between me versus you. And what we need to be working with is responsibility on our own soul level. Responsibility for ourselves, Pluto and Capricorn. So therefore we are working to balance our own needs and others' needs. And we're getting more clear on that whole giving and receiving issue. Now what's interesting, Pluto squares the nodes January 13th. Uranus opposes North Node, conjuncts that South Node January 20th. So this Pluto-Uranus squares will still have the 7th and final waxing square in spring of 2015. I don't have the date in my head right now. And so there's these two aspects to the nodal axis will be in tandem. And Uranus conjunct that south node. There could be the distortions emphasizing me, and my way or the highway. And what Uranus wants to be doing is breaking free to find an essence of who we really are. and have a real, liberating sense of self, that we don't feel threatened by relationships. Again, Libra Aries has to find freedom through relationships, balancing myself with others. And so Mars will bring, or excuse me, Uranus will bring to that surface, if we're too selfish, others in our face. If others are running over us, Uranus conjunct that South Node is going to give us the courage to say, wait a minute, no, I have needs too. You can see the other aspects. There are a couple with Saturn. Stay tuned to the weekly podcast for details on those. These Jupiter-Saturn orbs will be there for, varies, 2 to 4 weeks. We'll talk about them on the weekly podcast for you. And so I have gotten through all of, I'm not through all my slides. Thank you, everybody. I'll go through these faster. I wanted to give a slide earlier. We were asked the question, when the transiting nodal axis conjuncts the natal nodes, happens approximately once every 19 years, give or take a few months with retrogrades and all that good kind of stuff. This is completion of a cycle of lessons and rebirth of new ones. Very simple. Completing and moving on with the lessons of those natal nodes by sign and house. Rebirth of those intentions. When the nodal axis opposes the natal nodes, again, you see the ages halfway between those cycles, nodal cycles. There's an objectivity in order to release the past, or in order to move forward. That's the intent, to be objective. The past is looking forward, and vice versa. When the nodes are square the nodal axis, there is a lot of tension, frustration. There's 4 squares going on. You typically will feel squeezed. I gotta do something. I've got to act. Now, in all of the above, the conjunctions, the opposition, the squares, transiting nodes to natal, any of them can get stuck and repeat patterns. So you want to be just paying attention, just going, where do I feel stuck? Where do I feel deja vu? How do I feel like I'm having to do this again? What do I need to change?
Kim,
Mm-hmm.
can you make any comments on the relationship of this South Node in Aries as it relates to a Mars retrograde natally?
It's just going to put more emphasis on dealing with the natal Mars lessons. Natal Mars retrograde means there was impulsive actions in the past. Generically, Mars retrograde natally means you are learning to have more consideration in how you act, to really get clear on your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And so the South Node in Aries is going to emphasize that impulsiveness, and you're going to have to work to really make considered choices and actions. What do you really desire, rather than flying all over the place?
And colored by that house placement, signs, etc.
Colored by houses and signs, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, this is going to be fast, all right, because I want to get to my chart. Here's the eclipses. The eclipses occur when Earth, Moon, and Sun line up on that plane of the ecliptic. Sun 400 times larger than the Moon, but the Moon is 400 times closer to the Earth than the Sun is. Isn't that a synchronicity? I remember this from when I first started studying astrology and first looking at eclipses, and I thought, now who planned that one? Solar eclipses occur within a 36-degree band along the ecliptic, and they are only visible along a very narrow path, 90 miles wide. Lunar eclipses are a 26-degree band on the ecliptic, and they are visible for an entire hemisphere. Let me show you this visually, all right? Here's the solar eclipses, all right? And solar eclipses is when the moon is in front of the sun. Typically, this is a new moon only. When the moon is lined up in a straight line, Earth, Moon, Sun, the moon hides the sun. Solar eclipse, hiding the sun. And that little black spot on your screen is where there's a total eclipse. And that gray circle, if it's within the gray circle, it's a penumbra. And if it is halfway between that black dot and the gray area, it's umbra. Lunar eclipses. This is a full moon. This is where the Earth is between the sun and the moon. But because they are lined up in a straight line again, we hide the moon. And you can see where it's a total lunar eclipse. You can see where you look at this up here, penumbral, it's above this line right here. So, and then you see the partial lunar eclipse. So you can have different types of eclipses when you are working with lunar eclipses. And so this is what they mean visually when you see them written up. And again, lunar eclipses are visible from one whole hemisphere on the planet. North node eclipse season is when the sun is on the north node. There's an emphasis to move forward, develop the ego, evolve it. South node eclipses is when the sun is on the south node. Emphasizes reviewing the past, releasing the old. And there are anywhere from 4 to 7 eclipses annually. Typically, we'll see 4, sometimes 5. The next time we have 7 eclipses is 2038. And the last time we had 7 eclipses, I think, was in the 1970s, 1930s. They're not that often. They're very rare. Here's our eclipses. And so again, all I really want you to look at right now is, if it says South Node, that's where you're having to deal with the past. So you can see that's going to come in April. It's going to come in March and April next year. North Nodes is when it's going to be in the fall. So the April spring eclipses is about letting go of the past and old ego patterns around self. Letting go of old desires, Mars rulership. The eclipses in the fall, moving forward, evolving the ego, evolving relationships. Venus, the evolution of our needs in relationships. So there's your dates, there's your degrees. Again, you will have the handout. All right, any questions before I move into my chart example? And I thank all of you for hanging in there with me for 2 hours. Any other questions before I move on, Leroy?
Yeah, we have one here that should be pretty easy to address, I think. How about when sextiles and trines to the nodal axis? So you'd take that planetary energy and it's a sextile or a trine to the nodes. What effect do we have
You
there?
just put you put in the interpretation for sextiles and trines.
Ease.
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 Ease of effort. Ease of effort, ease of reward. But there's also an ease of resistance. When planets are sextile and trine the node or axis, we can resist the emotional evolution.
And we could put on our rose-colored glasses, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. The trines and the sextiles mean there's an ease of effort, ease of reward, ease of understanding, but we've got to make the effort.
That's the only
All right, any
additional
others?
question that came in, so you can move on to the chart example. I suppose we should queue up Miss Double H.
Yes, if she is on, and if you've got any way to mute yourself when we unmute you, volunteer. You can, if you've got any mutes on your headset, you might do that. Let us know.
Miss Double
Hi,
H, are
Vol.
you there?
Hi, can you hear
Hi
me?
there. Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
Do you have a headset with a little mute on it?
No, I don't.
All right. All right, that's all right. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll have Leroy mute you, and I'll do my monologue, and I'll check in with you for some information, okay? Yeah. Again, yeah, as you become familiar with showing up on these classes, the more you want to participate, getting yourself a headset into your computer or your device that has a mute function on it will allow us to get more and more interactive over the broadband. So here is a chart of a female. You've got her data up there. You can look at her chart. She's a 12th house Pluto, a Pisces Sol, retrograde, last degrees of Leo. You look at the nodal axis, you see the natal south node is 1 degree Taurus in the 8th. The sun's conjunct it. You see north node Scorpio. You see Jupiter conjunct the north node. You see, you can see most of the aspects that are going around here. The other thing that I want to point out before I move into things is that as I've put the little glyphs for the transit of the South Node in Aries up there in the 8th house, and I put the glyph of the North Node, my pretty pictures, so they stick out quite a bit. So you can see where the transiting nodes are for this soul. This female, a little bit of background, Jewish background, raised in New York City. Her parents were first generation American of Russian, I'm not going to pronounce this, Levadian parents. Capricorn mother, Aquarius father. She has a developmentally disabled older brother, middle class conditioning, current occupation, writer, editor, proofreader, marketer. I also know that she's an astrologer. She's been divorced. She has a teenage son who I think has just recently graduated from high school, getting ready to go to college. And so as we move forward with this, you can see natal Venus, Pisces, 7th house. You see natal Mars, Aquarius in the 6th house. So I want to just key in and work with the emphasis of what I had spoken to you about earlier. The nodal axis transit by signs will bring about some issues, surface issues, and the deeper issues will reflect back to the rulers of those signs, Venus and Mars, in the natal chart. Let's look at the South Node in Aries. When I work with the nodal axis, I have a tendency to go to the South Node first because it's the past, it's where we're coming from, it's what needs to be understood in order to evolve it and move across to the North Node. This transiting South Node in Aries, you can see that this soul recently had a nodal axis return. South node conjunct south node, north node conjunct north node. And so this is someone who's seen those natal nodes activated recently. So that south node, Taurus 8th house, the emphasis on finding their own self-reliance through 8th house issues of sometimes feeling abandoned or betrayed, deep Scorpio issues, and yet needing North Node to go forward and deepen self-reliance within themselves so that they can go back into those Scorpio issues, finding their courage, recommitting, recognizing they're not being abandoned by anybody else, they're not being abandoned by the world. Anytime the rug's been ripped out underneath them, South Node 8th house, they've become static, Taurus, and something needs to be removed in order to bring about evolution. You have a natal nodal axis in fixed signs, fixed houses, and the signs are the opposite of the natural houses. It will feel like a push-pull, but you break it down just like I've said. South Node, 8th house, rug ripped out underneath when they have become stuck, Taurus. And that then emphasizes North Node, 2nd house, evolving those inner levels of self-reliance so that they then, Scorpio, find that courage to go out there into the world again, Scorpio, out there into interacting with others. Now this can of course go all the way down to intimate issues when we're working with Scorpio Taurus. Briefly, that was what we were looking at with that nodal axis natally. The transiting nodes going over that would have emphasized that in some way. Now in my notes, this volunteer had a boyfriend partner of several years. Leroy, before I move on to the transits, let's in Libra-Aries, let's just check in with our volunteer and see if there's anything that happened in intimacy or relating to this theme I just mentioned with the nodal return.
Yeah, Kim Marie, that was a relationship that ended about a year ago, actually. So it was about a 4.5-year relationship.
Mm-hmm. Who ended it?
I did, but that's one of those things where what you talk about with the South Node in the 8th house rings so true because it's always about betrayal of some kind. In this particular case, he won't admit it, of course, but he's still basically stuck in his past and in love with his ex, in a nutshell.
And I would say that what it is bringing up for you is that lesson of taking your self-love to the next level that will then metamorphose the type of partner you will draw in the future. Drawing in a partner who will also take his self-reliance to the next level. Thank you. And thank you, Leroy, for muting and unmuting, and thank you, Volunteer, for being willing when we cut you off once in a while. So let me move us along. This transiting South Node is still in that 8th house, but it's now moved into Aries. And so it will have you looking at some of your own emotional 8th house motivations in how you have approached relationships in the world. It will have you North Node in the 2nd house in Libra, learning new levels of saying yes and no. And I would say because you had the courage to end that relationship in which your needs were most likely not being met, perhaps partner not being able to see you for who you were. This North Node in the second house then is going to take you forward into relationships, just carrying some of these patterns that we were just talking about further, in that I want somebody who's going to be present. I want somebody who's going to be there, Libra, who's going to participate, Libra. So you can see where that emphasis is still going on. But now let's do this. Remember I said those were more of the issues along the surface, and we take the rulers of those transiting nodes to go deeper. Well, the ruler of that south node is Mars. And you see Mars is there in the 6th house, 29 degrees Aquarius. Look at the tight opposition that Mars is making to Pluto, the soul. Strong emphasis there. And so what I would just pick up on from what you are saying is that there could be this tendency with Mars in the 6th, opposite that Pluto in the 12th, where you might sometimes take on the sadomasochistic tendencies, the Florence Nightingale stuff. Mars in the 6th house. I'll be the healer. I'll take care of you. I'll be the one to love you. You could put your needs less than someone else. You could put your Mars desires less than someone else. And so in a more positive way, what that Aries South node has been kicking in for you, it was doing it with Taurus South node, it's going to do it even stronger now with the Aries South node, going back to that ruler Mars in the 6th. And Aquarius, wait a minute, I'm going to step back and look at how sometimes I end up as caretaker in relationships while my own needs go unmet. And then I feel hurt, then I feel disappointed. And perhaps there could be a past life patterning with that Mars in Aquarius where you've come through lifetimes of some type of slavery or enslavement. Aquarius, Mars, Pluto opposition, Pluto in the 12th, where you didn't have the choice to have your needs met. And so for you, positive South Node in Aries could be finding your power again and going back to that Mars and go, wait a minute, my needs and desires count. They're important too. Let me check in. Am I coming close? Does that make sense? Am I off?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes sense, Kim Marie. One of the things I want to say is that it's interesting what you're saying, because I never considered it from that point of view of the Mars Pluto opposition. But all that makes sense, and it actually highlights what I focused more on, which is the Venus and Pisces in the 7th square Saturn in the 4th. And as you know, I am a student of Patricia Walsh's with the past life DMP, past life regression work. And in my regressions, what has come up is you use the word enslavement. I think that's almost, it's a self-enslavement or an enslavement because I actually do not recognize that I have an alternative. But most of my regressions have brought to light for me the stuff that's in the chart, which is obligation and duty to family. And in this life, current lifetime, the echo is, you mentioned when you did my bio that I had a developmentally disabled brother, my older brother. I look at that as the Saturn, to a certain extent, Saturn in the 4th square, the Venus, but and also an elderly disabled mother, but whom I'm now guardian for. But more to the point about relationships, I seem to always have attracted people with mental health issues, and married one and divorced one. And what came clear most recently is how much I project my own fantasies onto someone else. And that to me is that Venus in Pisces in seventh. But I have a question for you, because what I just noticed, and I looked up right before this program started, is that my progressed nodes progressed. I'm 55, I'm going to be 56 in April of this year. And the progressed nodes, it looks like they progressed, progressed retrograded back to Aries Libra at 52, so somewhere around 3.5, 4 years ago. I'm wondering how this is going to resonate, if that has any relevance, because since I had the natal nodal return, I'll be having a progressed natal nodal return. And I'm wondering, because technically it would be the first time that that would be happening, right?
I'm thinking, because the nodal transit is 19 years.
Right.
You know, in 19 years, you have a progressed return. Yeah, so you'll have that coming along too.
But it's a progressed return after only like 3 or 4 years, right?
No. No. Yeah, you take progressions are a day for a year. And so you would take the transiting nodes take 19 years to go around the chart. So in 19 years they go around your chart. Yes, a day for a year. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm tired, everybody. This is a lot of concentration for 2 hours for me, and it's a complicated subject. If somebody else is sharper than me right now by progressions, because I'd have to look it up. It'd be like the progressed moon. The progressed moon takes 30 years to transits around the chart in 30 days. It'll go around by progression in 30 years. The progression's 19 years. No, it'll never make it around in a lifetime. All right. What will happen is that with the progressions will be much slower. You're going to have the progressed north node moving into Libra at some point, and progressed south node in Aries. But I don't know what degree they are. Hold on, I can look it up pretty fast for you and find out. And while I'm looking that up, I'll carry on with everybody.
Yeah, the nodes did regress by progression already about 3.5 or 4 years ago. So they moved
into where?
Into Aries Libra.
Okay, so they're 29 degrees. Okay,
right.
I get what you're saying.
Yes, so what I'm saying is they've only been there for about, presumably around my upcoming birthday in 2 months or so, that they'll have been in Aries and Libra for about 4 years. So as the
got it.
nodal change. Yeah, you got me? Okay.
Yep, got it. Okay. All right, I got thrown there for a moment.
I know.
All right, so I gotcha. I'll let Leroy mute again. All right, thank you. I get a lot of feedback when the other person's talking. And so what she was saying is that by progression, the nodes have reversed back into 30, 29, 28 degrees, north node Libra, south node Aries, and the transiting nodes are right there. So they're conjunct. So it's a little bit of a double emphasis. The nodes by progression are going to be the rest of your life, south node Aries, north node Libra. So everything we're speaking about by this transit over 18 months will be true for you by progression the rest of this life. And again, somewhat of what I'm picking up with interacting back and forth with you is that south node in Aries is about you empowering self. Remember, astrology is observation correlation, and where that South Node in Aries can be so much around the self-centeredness, sometimes the South Node in Aries will be the opposite of that, the lack of self that needs to come up. And that strong emphasis of that Mars-Pluto opposition and the natal nodes where they are, I think you hit the nail on the head. You are having to re-empower yourself. And you are instead of being literally enslaved, which I still think you could have some lifetimes where you'll uncover where that's been the case. It's almost a pattern where you are unconsciously choosing to be enslaved, not knowing you have freedom. So that South Node in Aries could be bringing up freedom for you in different ways. And moving over to that transiting North Node in Libra in the second house, you could be working upon balancing where you are responsible with yourself and where you have responsibility with others. And somehow, if you are having to care for an elderly mother, the invalid brother, and a teenage son, you're going to have to balance an ability to have time for yourself, to be developing yourself as well. It's going to be very easy with that Mars-Pluto opposition to just keep being the caretaker. And if we look at the ruler of the transiting North Node, which is your natal Venus, it repeats some of that same energy. Venus in Pisces is a Florence Nightingale, and you put it in the 7th house, and it will have you again. What do others need? How do I take care of others? And so you're going to have to be evolving that 7th house Libra energy into what's fair, what's balanced. So what this brings up is the classic evolutionary astrology question of why with these types of circumstances. Is it partially or majority karma that has you in a situation where you're having to caretake others, and this is something that you are working to heal and to balance out? Or have you fallen into this caretaker pattern so much that there is a lesson here, there's a deeper lesson here of what is mine to be responsible for and what is not mine to be responsible for? I don't claim to be psychic enough to know whether it's karma or evolutionary necessity, if you are familiar with those terms. But that Venus in Pisces 7th house is going to be the deeper issue to the North Node. And what I see is a balance in your caretaking. And that need to take care of yourself. Venus, taking care of your own needs as much as anybody else's. It's that old pattern. You can only help somebody else as much as you help yourself.
Kim?
Yes.
Well, and also, re-emphasized by that strong late degree Pluto retrograde, pointing back at that Mars in Aquarius. And also kind of feeling like perhaps she's lived most of this lifetime looking in the rearview mirror with all those retrograde planets. It might be even more important to emphasize the liberation from that, or almost, wanting to become more selfish versus selfless one more time.
Yes, I see some emphasis on that. It's here's an example that's coming out the opposite of some of the information that we've talked about on the slides tonight, and this is why you've got to have that observation correlation. Let me hear from Sherry. Oops, I'm sorry, I gave your name away, sweetie. Let me hear from our volunteer again.
That's quite all right, Kim. Not a problem. Yeah, you're so uncanny. It's amazing. I mean, I think I don't want to leave you with the impression that I'm a full-time caretaker for either my mother or my brother. I'm not. And I believe that I've made some progress on that score. I also want to point out the South Node in the eighth. I've come to the realization that the past life karma is about the money, because I am the sole guardian, very small family, nobody else is left, and I have guardianship over my mother and my brother. My brother is independent at this point, which is wonderful, and I have someone else caring for my mother 24/7 because there was money put away for that. So I am now learning how to really handle that, and that's been a couple of years in the making. I feel, though, and I don't know if this is the shift, the recent shift of the nodes right now, but given the ending of the relationship that I had about a year ago, it's about boundaries for me. And so I think I've swung a little bit. What you're saying about finding the balance in the Libra South node as we go forward makes a lot of sense to me, because I think, you know, how when you're trying to balance out a pendulum, it swings one way too much and then it swings back the other way. It's almost like I'm very sour on relationships right now. I don't want anyone overstepping any boundaries, so I feel like I'll just have a whole bunch of boundaries for a while. You know, it's almost like when you're, the opposite of the rebound. It's like, okay, you know what? I don't want anything right now. But I know that that's not me. I just know that I'm aware. I'm ultra aware at this point of this, that Venus in Pisces, and also you were saying, you know, the Mars in Aquarius, kowtowing to the Pluto, you know. So I want that, but I'm aware that I need more balance there, and I'm sort of like the baby taking the baby steps, where I have to say no, or, you know, if you don't get it, then too bad, and not feel responsible. The other thing I just want to point out too, in terms of evolution, is it's taken me a long time to understand. I'm a sun opposite Neptune. I mean, it squares Uranus too, as do my nodes, my natal nodes. But sun, you know, when I really got into that in astrology, it's like I had no ego when I was younger, and I think it took me half a lifetime thus far to develop one. So, you know, it's difficult. You know, so many people and so many things out there talk about being more unconditional, whereas I need to be less unconditional because I've been giving it away my whole life. So, you know, that's a revelation to me. It's been a revelation over the past couple of years, but I really do feel like this shift right now. And I like what you said. I'm heartened by what you said about the fact that my progressed retro nodes, you know, now this is going to be the theme for the rest of my life, because that's music to my ears, because otherwise I'm kind of ready to go find a cave in terms of relationships, you know.
Again, if we go back to those rulers of the nodes, the transiting nodes, that Venus, Mars. I'm going to let Leroy mute again. The Venus is new phase Mars. And so this is, again, those deeper lessons, that phasal relationship with Venus, Mars. It has you initiating and trying new ways in intimate relationships this lifetime. And you can almost broaden this out into new ways of just relating to others in general with that Venus in the seventh. And there is a certain amount of discernment that high-seeing Venus is having to learn, and it is new for you. And so with those natal nodes where they're at, you could go to these extremes of, I'm either all in relationships without any sense of boundaries or objectivities, giving my all, or then going to the extreme of, well, then I'm going to have all these boundaries and nobody's going to get in. So that progressed nodal axis into North Node Libra, South Node Aries could help you maybe have a little more balance in that area instead of doing all the extremes. But again, natal Venus Mars for you, and each of you are going to be looking in your own charts at your phasal relationship between Venus and Mars, and look up those 8 phases, those 8 cycles, the cycle of phases and aspects: new crescent first quarter, gibbous full, disseminating last quarter, balsamic. See what your phasal relationship between Venus and Mars as rulers of the nodes are, because they're going to be important in how you are each evolving your relationships. This volunteer is starting a whole new cycle. And again, to me, what I kind of see emphasized is an ability, Mars Aquarius, Venus 7th house, and Venus Mars new phase, to just step back and have a little more objectivity and discernment in giving and receiving with relationships. What the transiting nodal axis is going to do is really start to bring that into conscious awareness for you. All right, let's see if we have anything else from our volunteer. And thank you all for staying a little late. Oh gosh, 15 minutes. I am so thank you.
Thank you, Kim Marie. No, I really appreciate it. I'm not going to belabor the points that I already made. I think that, no, this was great. I appreciated that. I've never heard the phasal relationship between Mars and Venus delineated before, so I greatly appreciate a tip of that. I think the only thing I would add is, like I said, I think what's arising organically from me is this kind of, okay, don't tread on me with that, with the nodes having moved into the South node moving into Aries. But that for me is a very healthy thing. And what you said is absolutely 100% true. I'm a person who has not had discernment, and that's the perfect word for it. That's the word that I've used too, just recently in my life, that, you know, I need to have some discernment. So, I mean, just as a quick aside, one of my past life regressions had me, you know, obligated to take care of my alcoholic mother and to go to work and make money. And this was around the turn of the century. And what I realized is that I began to make up a husband or mate because I was stuck in this situation and I couldn't go out into society and find a husband because it was like Victorian times or at the turn of the century, and my mother was basically an alcoholic, but I could work. So I worked and I made money and I kept the house and I, you know, I did all of the chores, but I was lonely. And so through that discovery, I realized how much I project onto a male, you know, that I make them up, and that was a huge revelation. So I think the Aries South node for me is going to be a huge evolutionary step, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, and it's going to help evolve that Venus signature too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm gonna let Leroy mute you, and I'm just gonna see if anybody's hanging in there. A quick question for clarification on this chart. I'm not gonna answer questions on other charts. Any questions or comments on this chart?
You seem to be clear, Kim.
Oh my gosh, everybody, thank you. I had no idea this was going to be so much information. I thank you so much for hanging in there. Stay tuned in 2 nights, the Mars retrograde class. It will be a much easier subject. This is just a repeat of what I said before. Now you see what I'm looking at, that phasal relationship in natal Venus Mars. The deepest issues and lessons for the soul on an egoic basis with this transit. Learning to meet one's own needs and desires through relationships, supporting others doing the same. And then again, this is also a repeat. Learning to go, how do we balance from selfish and selfless? Letting go of desires that no longer serve us, trusting our own instinct again, balancing ourselves with others. The Mars retrograde class will be a much easier subject. It will not take us long, and I'll try to work with more chart examples for you. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate this. You will get the MP3 file and the video link and the PDF of all these slides coming to you in the next day or so. And for those of you who are coming to the Mars class, thank you very much, and I'll see you in 2 nights.
Thank you, Kim.